And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Live Now looked there at the U.S. Capitol. Almost 5 years to the day of the January 6th Capitol riot, 4 years rather. We're getting a new report in from the Inspector General there at the Department of Justice about the FBI's role. The IG, his name, Michael Horowitz, he said there were more than 24 confidential human sources in the crowd on January 6th, but only 3 were assigned by the FBI to be present for the event, while stressing that none of the sources was authorized or directed by the Bureau to quote-unquote break the law or encourage others to commit illegal acts. Horowitz today releasing his highly anticipated report on the FBI's handling of its confidential human sources and intelligence collection efforts in the lead-up to the January 6th electoral certification and the subsequent Capitol riot here. In the meantime, our friend there, Fox News correspondent at the Justice Department, David Spunt, has this report. Let's watch.
The report makes clear there were no undercover FBI agents present on scene. However, 26 confidential human sources or government informants were in the crowd. Only 3 of them were asked by the FBI to be there. 23 others came on their own. Confidential human sources are not undercover agents. They are paid informants who already belonged to groups under law enforcement scrutiny, like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Out of the 3 asked to be there by the Bureau, 1 entered the Capitol and 2 others entered a restricted area, the report says. None of these FBI sources were authorized to enter the Capitol or a restricted area or to otherwise break the law on January 6th. Outgoing FBI Director Christopher Wray has repeatedly said any suggestions the FBI instigated the violence that day are, quote, ludicrous.
Agents, the answer is emphatically
You're saying no?
No.
You're saying no?
Not
Okay.
violence orchestrated by FBI sources or agents.
FBI critics, including allies of President-elect Trump, say the report only raises more questions.
If there were only 3 that were approved to be there, why were these additional 23 there? What was their role on that day?
None of the confidential human sources that entered the restricted areas were prosecuted. The D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office says it generally has not charged those individuals whose only crime on January 6th was to enter the restricted grounds surrounding the Capitol, and we have treated the sources consistent with this approach. The report also criticizes the FBI for not gathering useful intelligence beforehand. The FBI did not take all the steps that it could have taken to develop as complete a picture of the January 6th threat potential. In a response, the FBI said agents will continue to work with Homeland Security officials to secure the upcoming January 6, 2025 electoral certification. In Washington, David Spunt, Fox News.
David, thanks so much. Let's talk about this even further with Roger Severino at the Heritage Foundation. He joins us. Roger, good to see you here. Are you satisfied with this Inspector General's report today? Does this put a lot of what is out there about the FBI's role to bed finally?
No, not at all. Not even close. This actually raises a ton more questions. So finally, we know that there were paid FBI agents at the behest of the FBI on the Capitol grounds, 3 at least. There was another 23 that showed up on their own, right, which were paid FBI agents. And several of those.
Can we distinguish between an FBI agent and a confidential human source? You're saying essentially they're the same thing? From what I understand, they're not. Let's distinguish.
Yeah. These are informants, right? Okay. They're paid to provide information to the FBI, right? They're not uniformed. They're not undercover FBI agents themselves. Forgive me. They are paid informants. So these paid informants, the FBI contracted for, 3 in particular were called to the Capitol grounds, and the 23 others showed up on their own. Why would they show up on their own? And several of them allegedly broke the law and entered the Capitol themselves. So if you have paid FBI informants entering the Capitol grounds, where are those prosecutions of those folks? We have so many January 6 people in jail because they did the exact same thing as these paid informants. They entered the Capitol grounds unlawfully. The FBI says they weren't authorized to do that. Where are the convictions for those folks as well? And it raises all sorts of questions. What did they actually do? Did they incite people to go in? How much were they being paid? Would they be paid more if they were able to help with a conviction of somebody. All these incentives come together where you really wonder, let's show us a video, identify all these people so we know exactly what they did on January 6th and whether they instigated anybody or not.
So, Roger, you heard in that soundbite, Christopher Wray, the now outgoing FBI director, said there was no instigation of violence on behalf of those in the crowd, these confidential human sources here. The report says this: no undercover FBI employees were at protests or at the Capitol on January the 6th. Horowitz said, we found no evidence in the materials we reviewed or the testimony we received showing or suggesting that the FBI had undercover employees in the various protest crowds or at the Capitol on January 6th. So I know I'm kind of harping on the language of this, and it seems semantic. Undercover FBI employee, is that different than a confidential human source?
It is, and there's a distinction. However, there's a problem if you outsource your dirty work to other people. Right. So if you want to say, look, we actually didn't send an undercover agent, but we paid 3 people to do that sort of work. That sounds to be precisely what happened. And another 23 showed up. And of those 3 that were paid, at least one of them entered the Capitol, which was unlawful. So FBI paid somebody to do what exactly? Why do they think empowered that they should enter the Capitol with them? And by instigate, I say, what did they instigate? Did they say, hey, the door's open, come on in, and not reveal that they're actually a paid informant? This opens up a ton of questions as to what the FBI knew, what they were telling their informants, what they were supposed to do, and of course, what happened afterwards with the conviction of J6 people who did the exact same thing of walking into the grounds. I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about the people who simply walked onto the grounds.
And your argument right now is that those 3 individuals on behalf of the FBI as confidential human sources who did go into the Capitol and on the Capitol grounds should be prosecuted like everyone else, like the more than 1,500 cases that have been brought by the DOJ here. I wanted to ask, because I think some viewers watching are asking themselves, well, what was the FBI doing before January 6th? Why all of this activity? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, there were pieces of intelligence suggesting there could be violence on the electoral certification day, and that is why the FBI was involved, correct?
Well, the FBI has been looking at what they call domestic terrorists for a long time. And on that issue, they've been all over the map in terms of who they target. Where were they during Antifa rioting? Where were they during the summer of George Floyd, where the country was burning in our major cities and they were attacking federal courthouses and federal buildings? Where was the FBI? Where were the confidential informants infiltrating the left-wing groups? But if there was a pro-Trump movement, then all of a sudden the FBI jumps into action to try to see. Now, I'm saying anybody that has violent tendencies has to be prosecuted, no matter what. But it cannot be selective justice. It can't be that the people the FBI pays get off scot-free, and some groups don't get investigated because of their political leanings, and others do.
Okay, so that is a good segue into FBI Director Christopher Wray. He told employees just yesterday that he would be leaving the agency in January. You know, help us understand the role of the FBI Director. You hear the word a lot, you know, independence from politics here. He was in year 7 of his 10-year term. And the reason these terms are 10 years is to, you know, thwart any political interference from outside agitators and agencies and the like here. It's well known that President-elect Donald Trump does not want Wray to serve in that position here, even though Trump did appoint Wray after he fired Jim Comey in the first term. Why, if you were Wray, do you not just dare Trump to fire him? Does that smack of interference when Wray is resigning the post already? He doesn't want to put up that fight. He doesn't want to get it in the media here. Why not just have Trump do that in public if the independence of the agency is so important?
Well, is anybody above the law is the question. And what does the law say in terms of the Constitution as who runs the Department of Justice, who runs the FBI? Is it the president, or is it an appointee of the president? And then Christopher Wray is doing the right thing in stepping down. President Trump doesn't want him. He was the one who oversaw the raid on Mar-a-Lago. And remember, Judge Cannon threw out that case and said there was no authority for the special counsel to even pursue it. So this FBI director oversaw a raid on a sitting president, which was a former president, which was absolutely outrageous that it would be so heavy-handed. And there is a district court precedent and appellate court precedent saying a president has the authority to dismiss somebody soon before their term expires. I was dismissed by President Biden from the Administrative Conference of the United States before my term was up, and what's good for the goose is definitely good for the gander.
All right, let's talk about the pick to lead the FBI, his name, Kash Patel. Will he get confirmed or will he not get confirmed? What are you hearing in D.C.?
I think he will get confirmed. He's exactly the type of person we need right now to clean up the mess in the Justice Department.
Why is that? Does he have the experience? Does he have Christopher Wray's experience?
Yeah, well, first, he worked as a public defender. So he's been on the other side, even on the prosecutor side. He's been at DOJ in the National Security Division. He also worked in the National Security Division in the Office of the Director of National Director of Intelligence. So he has all the classified information. He's worked in law enforcement. He worked at DOJ. He worked on the other side as a public defender. I mean, what more do you need? He also worked on the case that dealt with the Russia hoax that exposed the entrapment that was going on and the funny dealings at the FBI going after President Trump and his associates, the Carter Page warrant issue, the abuses that our politicized Department of Justice has done. He was one of the primary persons exposing it, which of course qualifies him to be the one to undo the sort of corruption we saw. You cannot have politicized Department of Justice, you can't have the lawfare, and you need somebody who's willing to have the integrity and the experience to clean it up. And Kash Patel is perfectly positioned to be the man to do it.
Okay, Roger, full circle here, though. Fox describes the January 6th, the role the FBI had as a minor supporting role in responding to the Capitol riot here. I want to ask, is the FBI put in a better light after this report or not? Are there more questions? You're alluding to the fact there are still open questions. I mean, it's pretty definitive, though, who was there and who was not.
No, we don't know who the paid informants were. It's not definitive who was there. We know there were certain paid informers. What is their background? What are their political leanings? How much did they get paid? What is their criminal record? What is actually going on here? You cannot outsource the dirty work to a third party and then try to wash your hands. They entered the Capitol themselves. They broke the law. They were paid by the FBI to be there. That's a whole lot of questions that need answering. And of course, another part of the report is the information sharing. What information were they gathering? Could they have done something to figure out who, if anybody was being surveilled, that could be an agitator that was willing to engage in violence? So all these other and unanswered questions that does not make the FBI look good at all. I think they come out looking worse.
Okay, because we're talking about the 3 confidential human sources who were paid by the FBI. The others came to the January 6th events of their own volition here. So I wanted just to kind of stipulate that.
While being paid by the FBI to report on these sorts of things. So
okay, that seems unclear though. The 23 additional confidential human sources were in D.C. at the time. They attended January 6th events. The report says they determined that they did so on their own initiative and were not tasked by FBI field offices to attend the events there. So,
sure, it cannot be a coincidence that you had 23 people on the FBI payroll show up on January 6th, and several of them enter the Capitol, and at least 11 of them enter the Capitol grounds. That's about half of them allegedly broke the law. And that's a whole lot of questions. Why would so many FBI paid informants show up unless they thought there would be something in it for them that they could perhaps help the FBI in something? Those are the unknown questions that need to be answered. What did the FBI know, and when did they know it?
All right, Roger Severino, as always, thanks so much for your time. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.